Welcome to another installment of our 2020 Virtual Global and Community Engagement Conference, formerly known as D80. The conference is a dialogue and celebration of our efforts to solve issues that confront the world's poorest 80%. Traditionally, it's a one-day conference featuring multiple in-person panels and breakout sessions. This year, the conference is being delivered virtually throughout the entire month of October, including a lecture series, a rosé gallery exhibit, a walking tour, and a series of online interviews with local and global changemakers throughout the Michigan Tech community. My name is Thomas, and I'm a member of the Conference Planning Committee. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Joan Chadde. I'm going to read a bio for Joan. Joan Chadde is the director of the Center for Science and Environmental Outreach at Michigan Tech. Her 25-year history of serving teachers and students across the state of Michigan with original and impactful outreach recently awarded her the 2020 Michigan Tech Diversity Award. As a founding member of both the Diversity and Inclusion Committee of the statewide Michigan Alliance for Environmental and Outdoor Education and the Michigan Tech Civil and Environmental Engineering Diversity and Inclusion Committee, Chadde is most in her element when she's outdoors. But her work also requires resourcefulness and tenacity in the office. It's one thing to craft and operate programs, and another thing entirely to fund them. Chadde excels at both. In a recent interview, she states, "Diversity suggests a wealth of new ideas that enrich and improve our lives. Inclusion means making people feel welcome and valued. There is an additional dimension to both diversity and inclusion, equity. Equity is vital to diversity and inclusion because it connects to justice. Places, programs, and opportunities need to be equally accessible to all, and all participants must have an equal chance of success." She's been engaged in water/natural resource, science and STEM, STEM standing for science, technology, engineering, and math, and environmental education for the past 30 years. Joan is co-author of the nationally disseminated Family Engineering Activity and Event Planning Guide, and lead author for the Michigan Water Quality Unit for middle school students in Michigan. She's committed to developing and facilitating dynamic, engaging STEM learning opportunities for diverse audiences of teachers and K-12 students to spark interest, build confidence, and encourage STEM and natural resource career pathways. Joan, thank you for your time today. We appreciate you being a panelist for this year's Virtual Global and Community Engagement Conference. So we're going to get going with the first question. First off, would you be willing to take a few minutes just to tell me a little bit about your organization?
Sure, and thanks so much for having me today. So the Center for Science and Environmental Outreach has a long history at Michigan Tech. I'm not going to go into the great detail, but it started in the early 90s, and it has evolved over time, but the real mission has not changed, and that is to engage K-12 students and teachers and their communities in learning about science, environmental education, and really over the last 25 years, as Thomas explained, with STEM. And so that is now the big word that we use that's really an umbrella of science, technology, engineering, and math. And we have done this in many, many ways. As Thomas also mentioned, the center is entirely grant funded at Michigan Tech, which always has us scrambling to get additional funds, but it also it prods us to be creative because we can't just keep funding the same old thing. So some programs have lasted for a couple decades, like our Family Science and Engineering Nights and our Outdoor Science Investigation Field Trip program. But others were always developing new ideas and new ways of reaching out to K-12 students, teachers, and communities.
Thank you. So I have a couple follow-up questions to that. You mentioned that you started this entire process in the 90s, and certainly since the 90s, a lot of things have changed with STEM, including the development of the general acronym of STEM. I was wondering what sort of innovations you've seen from the 90s to now and how you change your outreach.
Well, that's a really good question. Yeah, when I think back actually to some of the early teacher professional learning actually that we were doing in the 90s, part of it was that there wasn't as much available, and it wasn't available here in the Western Upper Peninsula. So like one of my first teacher workshops was on watersheds and stream monitoring and assessing the health of streams. And we had an Environmental Protection Agency grant that funded the purchase of all of the supplies that teachers would need. We had a dozen participating teachers from area high schools in the 5 western counties of the Upper Peninsula. And, there was just a new idea. What is a watershed and how to determine the health of watersheds by collecting both water chemistry and biological organisms. So that was the beginning. And you know what? That actually kind of hasn't really changed. Everyone still needs to know these things. And so that does continue to be taught. But what engineering, that is really new. I mean, it's new in the curriculum. A few high schools around here do include it. There's many more downstate will have some form of engineering or STEM in their curriculum, but it's like hard to aspire to be something you've never heard of. And so if we think about the 90s, certainly students were not hearing about engineering, and yet engineering is a creative way to solve a lot of problems in our society, in our environment, in our world. So that is a big change. And then also just the idea of inquiry and investigation. We no longer see education as a collection of facts that need to get imparted to students. It's them becoming scientists and becoming engineers to investigate either scientific challenges, or engineering is kind of like designing solutions. So that, I think, is a really big change in education.
Yeah, and it certainly sounds like that you've noticed those changes and have been able to act on them. You mentioned that you've had family science nights and as well as field trips, certainly giving people the opportunity to really engage and kind of play the role of what it means to be scientist, engineer. So may you please just tell me a little bit about just a couple examples of what those events kind of look like, or what sort of things that K through 12 students are able to engage in?
Yes. So I want to come back to the family science. It started as family science, and we had family math, and then we added in family engineering. And so now I just call them family science and engineering. But family, that's the key, is so we could reach out to students. I mean, we do, of course, during the school day as part of their curriculum, but parents have a huge impact on the choices that their children make and the opportunities they get exposed to, what they're going to do after high school. And so getting parents on board to better understand the opportunities of being a scientist and an engineer. So just like engineering was not common in the 90s and many students hadn't heard of it, neither did their parents unless they were an engineer. And even on Tech's campus, I'll ask students how they became interested in engineering. And it's usually because they had a family member that was an engineer. So if you don't have that, you are not getting exposed or having that idea presented to you. So that is a big reason we do family programs, is that the families can support that extended learning of the student. Did that answer everything there?
Yeah, certainly. That went above and beyond. That's awesome, especially in such a rural area too. That program's definitely needed to achieve the goals that you mentioned.
Oh, I want to add one more thing. I'm sorry.
Uh-huh.
Is that we teach it using Michigan Tech students, and they're the role models. And that is also really, really key. It's like, I often think of myself as the facilitator or the coordinator. I'm not always the best messenger. I might know what the message is, but I have to have the right messenger. And so that is where Michigan Tech students come in. They have made a choice about their career, what they want to pursue. They're excited, they're passionate, and they're, obviously much closer in age to the students that they're presenting to. So they are really the best people to put out there to inform both K-12 students and parents, because they're in the middle of it.
Yeah, certainly. That's really cool. You can get the university students involved too. I know there are a good number of organizations on campus like Society of Women in Engineering and Mind Trackers that do a really good job of working with the local community to kind of pass along what engineering, STEM in general are all about.
Yes, we've been doing it since the mid 90s. In fact, another program is Family Forest Nights. So really, we had our first one in 1997. So we have whole generations of students have moved through our program, and now they even have their kids come back. It's like, okay, we've been around a while when you have that start happening.
That's amazing. I'm sure you hear a lot of cool stories about how people have been impacted in different ways.
Yes, it's great. And sometimes actually those students are now the teachers as well. And so then they're also passing that on to their classes.
That's so cool. That's awesome to hear. I'm going to move on to our second question here. So how does your work in general align or connect with this year's conference theme of the pursuit of social equity and representation? So we kind of already touched on this just naturally in the first question, but I was wondering if there was anything specific to that you wanted to add.
Yes, because what we've really been talking about is programming that we have been delivering in the Western Upper Peninsula. Now, you had mentioned earlier in my introduction about the family engineering event planning and activity guide. That's because we want to tell you how to put on a family engineering event. So that is just disseminated across the country, which is really exciting. And the idea, again, is to make it available to students who might not normally be exposed to it, and therefore not their parents. So that's definitely getting to a diverse audience by getting it out there, you know, making people aware through conferences and so on. But here in Michigan, we became aware, that was about around 2009. You mentioned the organization, Michigan Alliance for Environmental and Outdoor Education. We were having a conference in Dearborn, Michigan, and we discovered that there were only 2 members from the city of Detroit. Detroit, it's our largest population center, and only 2 teachers are aware of the professional environmental organization in Michigan. So we clearly knew this was a need and that we had not directed any resources to it. So at that point, we began writing grants to conduct teacher workshops, which included providing classroom resources to the teachers and also field trips where students could get out and do the same sort of things we did with the Upper Peninsula students. But now they could get out in the city of Detroit, and they could actually learn, where does their water come from? How do we evaluate the health of a stream? Looking at what is a healthy forest ecosystem. So that was a real turning point. And so since 2000, well, I said that conference was 2009, and you know, it takes a year usually to get a grant, but since then, we have regularly had a wide variety of projects funded by grants that we have delivered in the Detroit public school system to get more students interested in, again, the natural resource career path, and of course, engineering. They are exposed to engineering. They're much less exposed to the environment and natural resources. And yet that actually happens to be the least diverse career path, is natural resources. But we need to have a diversity and a variety of people pursuing that because there's certainly plenty of environmental challenges in urban areas. And so we really want to make students aware of how they can become engaged, and that is a very viable career path for them. So most recently, actually, I had a 2-year project funded by the Environmental Protection Agency, again, in Detroit, which was titled Creating Great Lakes Stewards to Protect Detroit's Water Resources. And that worked with middle school students. Over 2 years, we had 30 teachers and 800 middle school students that participated. They went on, each of the students went on 3 field trips each year, and the teachers attended 5 one-day workshops. And that was really built on the idea of, here we had Flint, and many people are aware of the water crisis that was in Flint, began in 2014. Well, so it's in people's minds. So it was an opportune time to reach out in Detroit and help them become more aware of their water resources and their role, how they could be involved in protecting their water resources. An area that many have not really heard of is green infrastructure. So it's a way to make your city more sustainable. And there are some really great examples in Detroit. And we really, really wanted students to feel positive. We don't want to just go, pollution, pollution, pollution. No, there's some great things happening right here in your city. These are ways you can manage your stormwater runoff. You can protect the Detroit River. You can reduce infiltration. So all kinds of things. It was really exciting to both share it with the teachers who can take it forward. This isn't going to be just a 2-year project, because now the teachers are empowered for whatever the next 10 or 20 years that they teach. But also these students have new ideas that they can consider pursuing, post high school, to consider actually as a career path.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's really interesting what you said about the Michigan Alliance for Education, that there were only 2 teachers in the Detroit area who at that time were attending the conferences.
Right.
Yeah, and tying that into just urban environmental issues in general, it's really hard. I imagine it would be really hard to tackle those problems, or at least get younger generations to be thinking about tackling those issues if teachers aren't even aware of them in the first place. Yeah, I find it extremely interesting how you ingrain teachers into that, because when you set up these programs and you're involved with them, you're kind of, you can't go to every school and be teaching people. Is that a lot of administrative work for you then, to be
It's a lot of coordination? Yes, it is. And I want to also, as we talk about this, actually, like specifically say STEM career role models. So that is another, an addition that we had both. I mentioned about, again, the Great Lakes, creating Great Lakes Stewards, that project. And then another one that I'm involved in currently is as a partner with Wayne State University and the Belle Isle Conservancy at the Belle Isle Aquarium. But we have people of color who are in these career paths. There are not a lot. We have to look pretty hard, but when we find them, and actually that's what's been really kind of exciting. We have a lot of downsides to this whole virus and COVID, but everything's gone online. Well, now, it's so much simpler for them to be able to have a Zoom meeting with the class and tell about their career and how their experience, how they, the passion they have for it, how they really feel like they're making a difference. So that has been super cool. And some of them are actually Michigan Tech graduates, which is also really cool. One, Teriana Bradley, she graduated with her master's in environmental engineering, and she's now working for the state of Wisconsin DNR in air quality. Another one is Zoe Miller, who's working with the Army Corps of Engineers in Detroit on water resource issues. But so it is really great. It's not only Michigan Tech students, but it's cool that some of them are. And so they're, again, the best messenger. They did it. It's not me saying, you should do this. It's people just like themselves who can share the struggles, but also share the fulfillment and the impact that they're having. So I really, really like these STEM career role models.
I find that so interesting. It seems like that there are a lot of different elements and angles that you can take to solve this issue, but you do a really good job of integrating a lot of different variables and angles to achieve your goal. So moving on to our next question, how did you personally get involved with this work, and how has it impacted you personally?
Wow. That is kind of a big question, in that I don't think there's any one thing I could probably put a finger on, but okay, so I really enjoy the outdoors, and that is actually because someone introduced me to it in high school. It wasn't like I didn't grow up with a family, people talk about, oh, my family went camping all the time, or we did this. Not my family at all. And so somebody introduced me to the idea of enjoying the outdoors through camping and biking and hiking. And wow, I loved it. And I'm like, and I think about that. What if no one had? So how do we realize our potential? We're not, and we don't all have to pursue the same thing, of course, but what if you never got that exposure? You never found out that you had a passion for something. So I think that is a big key. And so another program that we have is creating, sorry, a lot of creating. No, this one is on natural resource and engineering exploration for high school students, and I would add underrepresented. So we've done this for the last 5 summers at Michigan Tech, obviously not this summer, and we would bring up to 20 students. We started totally focused on Detroit, but then we've just expanded it, you know, it's underrepresented across the state of Michigan, to the campus for 6 days. And during that time, they interact with a variety of natural resource and engineering faculty and students, again, those student role models. And we go on field trips, and we go to the Porcupine Mountain State Park and National Forest, just so again, they're out in the field and on campus. And we take them kayaking and mountain biking and hiking. And every day we debrief about their role, you know, how they can make an impact in terms of being environmental stewards and promoting sustainability. And by the end of that week, one, those students have interests they did not even realize. Like they didn't know how fun it was to be outdoors. They totally enjoyed it. And then they also really feel a sense of commitment to making a difference in terms of promoting environmental quality and sustainability. So that is kind of like, again, thinking about if no one had ever exposed me, I would not know. And so I want to do the same for these students too, is to give them these opportunities and find out where their passions are. And you might choose it as a career, or you might simply live your life and now have these added things incorporated, whether it's, you know, again, stewardship behaviors and recreation. That we could go off we could spend a lot of time talking about that, because I do like spending time outdoors. And I will tell you, there are very few people of color in the places I go, you know, the national parks and national forests, and when I'm backpacking, and they're not there because you have, unfortunately, a long history of not having people of color feel welcome. And so somebody has to introduce them, and they have to feel like it's safe. And the people that I work with in Detroit, one has planted this idea in my mind. He says, if I look in a place and I don't see people like myself, then I don't go in. And you could think of that as a restaurant, or you could think of that as a national park. Another person I work with, I'm like, oh, come visit me. You can, stay in my house and we're going to go do all these fun things. And she's like, well, is it safe? Like, can you imagine if you had to think, can I go to this place? Is it safe? Is it safe to me in that, not necessarily a physical attack, but will I feel welcome? Will somebody be friendly to me? Or if you're not going to experience if you're not going to have a positive experience, like, why put yourself through it? So that's what really does drive me to, I want all people to feel welcome and to have that opportunity to enjoy the outdoors. There's so much benefit from it, and having a clean, high quality environment for people to live in.
Yeah, certainly. And I find it super interesting. In one of the previous questions I asked, you talked about how in general, diversity and inclusion, kind of promoting that entire concept helps to get the widest pool of big thinkers about a certain topic, and can really help to get the best answers to problems. And I also find it interesting how you kind of combine that with your personal motivations, just more from a personal side, wanting to make people feel just valued, included, and just give people opportunities to, whether it's recreationally or from an academic or STEM standpoint, just be able to go after the things that they want and to be able to enjoy the outdoors.
Yeah, well said. Thank you. That was a great summary. Great.
Yeah. So I got to ask you, you're just talking about the outdoors quite a bit. What is your favorite national park, and what do you like to do there?
Wow. Well, I think I might do a little pivot and call it this past summer and previous three, is the Wind River Range of Wyoming. Now, that's right near the Grand Tetons and Yellowstone, so they're not far away. But the Wind River Range is, it's just beautiful. And the Alpine Lakes and the peaks, I always say I really love the Upper Peninsula, but we are missing the big mountains. And so I do miss the Rocky Mountains in that sense. And I would have to say that that is my favorite. So I love backpacking. It's one of those things, it's not for everybody, but if you don't mind a little pain and you don't mind like working really hard, and then, you know, when you work hard and you reach the top of the peak, you can feel really good about it. So I love backpacking, and the Wind River Range is beautiful. And that would have to be my answer to that question. The national parks, I love the national parks. I could just, you know, spend time going from one to the next. And actually the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Refuges are also really good places to go. Parks, national parks sometimes can get crowded. That's the one, you know, you just have to keep that in mind. But you know what? Usually once you get a few miles away from any trailhead, it's not crowded anymore, because most of them don't make it that much further. So anyway, and I guess I would also have to say, you know, sometimes people go, well, do you do that a lot? I said, you can't do anything a lot. There's so many things to do. You just have to keep doing lots of different things. So I think that's probably why I couldn't say I have one favorite, but there's a lot of awesome places to go.
Yeah, well, I will certainly have to put that on my bucket list of a place to go visit.
Yeah, contact me. I'll help you out. Because
Thank you.
I have to go say that I started there in 1980. So again, we're going way back, but I did live in Wyoming at that time, and it was awesome. And so it's been really fun to continue to go back.
Certainly. All right. Well, we are wrapping up our interview here. What is one takeaway that you'd like others to know about your personal mission and the initiatives that you've helped to develop, both in the state of Michigan and across the country?
Okay, well, I have a little phrase I like to use. There's no time like the present. Do not put anything off. There's so much that needs to be done. We all need to be doing something. Yes, you can kind of set priorities about what's the most important thing, but sometimes there's things that maybe they're not your top priority, but you can get them done right now. So I would just say we all need to be working on something, or maybe a lot of things. But if we're not speaking up and out, then we are part of, we can call it the problem. Or so that, you know, take someone outside, expose someone to new ideas. There's just so many options out there. Everyone's not going to fit in the same box, but just make sure that you're active, engaged, involved, and getting the word out. And there's so many different ways to do that, whether it's helping to fund something, or helping to put on a workshop, or just taking someone out for a hike that has never had that experience. I guess it's just be active and do something.
Yeah, definitely got to be proactive to get things done. All right. So thank you so much for your time, Joan. I really appreciate it. It was awesome to talk to you more, and mostly just listen about your work. I learned a lot from it.
Thanks. I really enjoyed talking with you too. Yes, we could certainly spend a lot more time, but
yeah,
it was really enjoyable. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, it's quite inspiring. And then for those who are listening, Joan indicated that the best way to contact her with some more information about her work and involvement would be through email. So we will have that in the description, or we'll have it pop up on the screen for anyone who'd like to reach out to Joan. Thank you again for listening, and you can keep coming back to the Michigan Tech Global and Community Engagement Conference website. You can do that by going to mtu.edu and just going to the search bar and entering Global and Community Engagement Conference. There are going to be a lot more interviews going on in October. So yes, thank you for listening, and thank you again, Joan.
You're welcome. I can't wait to listen to. Thank you.